All right, so we're going to talk about changing decimals into fractions. And I'm going to read through the steps, and you can already see the example done, but I'm going to rewrite the example out to the side. So we're going to start with the number 5 and 24 hundredths. And I'm going to follow step 1. Step 1 says to put a 1 under the decimal point. So not only does the example show it, I'm going to put a 1 underneath the decimal point. Then step 2 says to put a 0 under each digit after the decimal. So I have 1, 2 digits behind the decimal, so I need to put 2 zeros behind the decimal. Now it says 3, rewrite as a fraction. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write it as 5 and 24 over 100. All I did was take away the decimal and then leave the 5 in the whole number spot. 24 is my numerator and 100 is my denominator. And then the last step is to simplify. So remember, we have to use those divisibility rules. So I'm going to look at the fact that 24 and 100 are both even numbers. So I know all even numbers can be simplified by 2. So I'm going to simplify by 2. And 24 divided by 2 is 12, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. Now notice I'm not doing anything to the whole number. We're going to always leave that whole number alone. We're only simplifying the fractional part of the mixed number. Okay, now I'm going to check again. 12 and 50. I still have 2 even numbers because I have a number that ends in a 2 and another number that ends in a 0. So they're both even numbers, so that means I can simplify by 2 again. And 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 50 divided by 2 is, half of 50 is 25. It's like thinking like you have 2 quarters, and then if you just have 1, that means you have 25, right? So 6 over 25 is my simplified fraction. So can I simplify 6 and 25 anymore? No. So all I'm going to do is put my whole number back in front. And my final answer is 5 and 6/25. Okay, so we're going to do some more examples together down here. Okay? And I'm going to repeat that process. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1 underneath that decimal. I'm going to put a 0 with how many digits are there. Since I only have one number behind the decimal in this case, I only want to put 1 0. Then we're going to rewrite as a fraction. So we're going to put 8 tenths. Okay, well 8 and 10 are both even numbers, so I know then that I can simplify by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. And we can't simplify anymore, so I just changed my decimal of 8 tenths, or 0.8, into 4/5. Okay? All right, let's try that again. I'm going to put a 1 underneath the decimal. How many numbers are behind the decimal? Just 1. So I'm going to put just 1. Okay? So here we have 8 tenths. So we know, I'm going to rewrite 8 tenths up here. We already know when simplifying by 2, because we just did that one, it would be 4/5, right? But the difference between this number, or 3 and 8/10, and 0 and 8/10, is 0 has no value. So we didn't have to put a 0 in front of the 4/5. Here we do have a whole number. We have a whole number of 3. So here in this case, we want to make sure we put 3 and 4/5. We have to put that whole number back in front of our fraction. We have to make sure that we do not forget to put it in front, and we're not going to simplify the whole number. Remember, we're not doing anything to the whole number. We're just messing with just a fraction. All right, let's do the next one. Again, we're going to put that 1 underneath the decimal. Then we're going to see how many digits are behind the decimal. Well, there's 2, so we're going to put 2. So now I'm going to rewrite it as a fraction. I see the number 5, so I'm going to write 5 over 100. And I'm going to use my divisibility rules that I learned since the very, very, very beginning of the year. 5 and 0. Number that ends in a 5 and a 0 can be simplified by 5. And 5 divided by 5 is 1. I'm going to kind of wrap around here. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. So because I have no whole number here, my answer is just 1/20. Okay? Okay, now look here. What's nice about this one is we already see we have the 0.5 and the 0.5. So we know that our decimal, we already know over here the fractional piece is going to be 1/20 because we already did that with the 0.05. We already know that we're going to get 5 over 100 divided by 5, and we're going to get 1/20. But here we have to remember to copy the whole number in front. So we have to put the 7 in front of the 1/20 for 7 and 5/100. If it's 0 and 5/100, it would just be 1/20. But 7 and 5/100 would be 7 and 1/20. So don't forget to copy the whole number in front, okay? All right, let's look at these bottom 4. Notice that we have the 0.35 or 0 and 35/100, and then 9 and 35/100. So I'm going to kind of work these out together. Okay, here we see 2 numbers behind our decimals, so we're going to fill those in with zeros. Same thing here. We have 2 numbers behind our decimals, so we're just going to fill those in with zeros as well. I'm going to write just the fractional piece. So I'm just going to write 35 over 100 down here at the bottom. And I'm going to do my simplifying. If a number ends in a 5 and a 0, which both numbers do, then that means I can divide by 5. So 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So that means if I have no whole number in the front, I can just say my simplified fraction is 7/20. And for this one, yes, we're still going to have the fraction of 7/20, but we need to remember to copy the whole number in the front. So for 9 and 35/100, the fraction form would be 9 and 7/20. Okay? Okay, now we're going to do the last set. So I'm going to do them at the same time, put my 1 underneath that decimal. There are 2 numbers behind the decimal, so we're going to fill in with 2 zeros. And we're going to rewrite that as a fraction. Again, we're going to ignore the whole number right now. We're just going to focus on the fraction 44 over 100. Okay, I'm going to use my divisibility rules. And I know that all even numbers, or numbers that end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, are going to be divisible by 2. So I have a number that ends in a 4 and a 0. So I know that they are divisible by 2. And 44 divided by 2 is 22. And 100 divided by 2, or half of 100, is 50. And now I have 22 over 50. But I recognize that those are both even numbers as well, so I can simplify by 2 again. And 22 divided by 2 is 11, or half of 22 is 11, and half of 50 is 25. Okay, I cannot simplify anymore, so 11 over 25 is my most simplified fraction. So for 44 hundredths, my answer would just be 11 over 25. For 6 and 44 hundredths, my answer would be 6 and 11 over 25. Okay, so basically, if the whole number is 0, you do not need a whole number in the front. If there is a whole number, you're not really going to do anything with it. You just need to copy it in front of the fraction.